Welcome everyone to the third of our activism series. We're flying through them, it's really exciting. So today we are joined by Lily Grimshaw, and we'll do some introductions in a sec. And she's going to be talking about her sort of activism journey, particularly around gender equality and women's rights. So like I said, let's just do some introductions. So the group have said today that we're just going to say who we are and what our favourite inspirational quote is that sort of helps us when we're campaigning. So my name is Ellie and I coordinate the Gen Z project. And I should have thought about this before going first. I'm going to pick up my book and find an inspirational quote. This is a good one actually. First one I've seen is one of my favorites, which is a Martin Luther King quote, which is, "The time is always right to do what is right." And I'm going to pass on to Mia.
Hi, I'm Mia, 17, and I'm part of the Gen Z project. I think my favourite quote is also in the booklet. We don't actually know who said it, but the quote is, the most powerful thing you could ever believe in is yourself." I'm going to pass it to Muskan.
Hi, I'm Muskan, I'm 15, and my favourite inspirational quote is, "Let your smile change the world, but don't let the world change your smile."
Oh, that's so cute.
I'm going to pass it on to Stephanie.
Hi, my name is Stephanie. I'm 13. I'm also working with the Gen Z project, and my favorite one is "It Can't Rain Forever." And I'll pass it on to Yami.
I can't really hear you, Yami.
Wait, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's gone again, Yami.
Oh no.
You can write it in the chat if that's helpful.
Okay.
Awesome. So whilst Yami is writing that in the chat, so last but not least, we'll go to Lily, who is with us today.
Hi, I'm Lily and I'm the Women's Officer for Sheffield Students' Union. And I think my favourite quote, which is quite a personal one, is, "You've made it through 100% of your bad days." So it's just a little reminder of well-being one, which I think is really important given everything that's going on at the moment as well.
Definitely, that's a really good reminder to us all. However bad things feel, we've got through stuff before and we can carry on. So now over to Lily to talk through her journey. So what we're going to do today is we've got sort of a few questions that the steering group are going to ask to Lily to talk about, and then we'll open it up to the floor for Q&As, which you can write in. There's a Q&A box, there's also a chat box as well, so wherever you fancy, and we will ask them to Lily. So with no further ado, I'll one further ado, Yami's quote. So Yami has said she's part of the Gen Z steering group and her favourite quote is, "Don't take criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice from," which is a very good point as well.
A good one.
It is. So I'll pass on to Muskan to start us off.
Tell us your story. What made you become an activist for your cause?
So my story. So I think I'm thinking back to when I first started becoming interested in politics and gender equality and campaigning and things. And I think the first key moment was when I took politics at A level. So I've always been quite interested in sort of feminism, and I remember being inspired by my mum quite a lot as well. She was absolute inspiration to me growing up, and she still is. So I took politics at A level, and we had this most amazing teacher who just really engages with sort of our learning and exposes to a lot of different key figures, and at the time when we were studying it, it was 2016, and we had the Brexit election, and then we had Brexit referendum, and then Trump's election as well. And I think I remember just the public feeling, and us as quite young students at the time just being absolutely in shock and awe at what was going on, and a lot of anger, I think, as well, because especially with Trump's election, he is and was and remains an absolutely abhorrent man, and someone who is very, very firmly misogynistic and racist and all of the rest of it. And I think it was that anger and disbelief at how the public had been able to sort of elect this man. So I think, looking back now, that was like the key defining moment where I was like, actually, I'm really, really angry about this, and I'm going to keep campaigning about it. And obviously, as part of the course as well, I was really introduced to like the history of feminism, and the movement of it, and how the changes that have been made throughout history, and how it continues to sort of grow and develop. And because I had such a strong interest, I took history and politics at university. So I graduated last year, and have been, again, learned so much about all the different aspects of feminism, but also much wider than that. We covered a lot of different social issues as well. And I did a lot of campaigning, especially with the Feminist Society. So at university, you have societies, which are basically different groups for different events and campaign things. So there's like 350 of them, I think. And each week at the Feminist Society, we had basically different topics and issues. So we did one, I remember we did a campaign on Consent Week, looking at abortion, looking at feminism in the media. And it was just this absolutely amazing group of both girls and boys, which is really surprising as well, coming together and sort of discussing the different issues and having that space to share our own experiences, which is something that I'd never really, been exposed to before. So we did quite a lot of campaigns, we did a lot of fundraising as well, and worked quite closely with a few local charities. And then, so I graduated last year, and this time last year, actually, the officer elections were coming up. I don't know, should I go into a bit of detail about what the SU officers do? I think that'd be helpful, wouldn't it? So there's 8 of us, and we are elected by our student body, and I ran on a manifesto. And you basically, say different aspects that you would like to see changed within the student experience. So a key one for me was sort of raising awareness about sort of everyday sexism, and especially looking at the sports teams and the drinking culture and problematic behaviours and things which myself and quite a lot of my friends have sort of experienced. Some not very nice behaviour, I think, from the sports teams, and having that awareness about the effects. And again, coming back to that anger that people were getting away with a lot of sexist and harmful behaviour. So yeah, we wrote our manifestos, and then we were elected, and we had a massive election night, and it was amazing. And since June, I've been in this position where I work very, very closely with different student groups within the Students' Union. But I also work very closely with university members on different issues. And yeah, it's just been sort of engaging with students, but also lobbying the university to implement some quite key changes. Yeah, I don't know if that's if you had any more questions just regarding that.
I think that's great, thank you. We're going to try with Yami. Hopefully Yami's microphone will work. If not, I will ask the next question.
What?
Doesn't seem to be working, I'm afraid, Yami. It sort of starts and then fades out. Yeah, we can't hear you at all. Okay, should I ask the next question? Okay, sorry, Yami. So the next question that Yami was asking is, what or who inspires you as an activist?
There's so many different people. I think it's quite hard to sort of pin it down. When I was thinking about it, I was trying to think of like key people in different areas. So I think a key one for me, which isn't necessarily one to do, I guess it is to do with gender equality, but is Michaela Cole. I don't know if you've heard of her. So she wrote and co-starred the TV series I May Destroy You. And she's an inspiration to me because she was she's a survivor of sexual violence, and she used her trauma and her experiences to basically create this series, which expresses and goes into quite a few different examples of consensual behavior and sexual violence and things. And for me, I think that's the most inspirational thing, to take something so awful that's happened to you and turn it into a thing of good to educate people. And she's absolutely incredible. I think another key person is Gina Martin, who introduced the upskirting bill in 2019. So I'll say a bit about it because I find it really interesting. So upskirting is basically when individuals take photos without consent of people's underwear, basically in a public space. And it happened to her at a festival back in 2018 or 17. And she couldn't believe that it wasn't illegal at the time to do that. So she was absolutely appalled and just started a campaign to make it illegal, and she got it passed through the government minister's bill. And the law was introduced in 2019, and it's now, I think, offenders can receive 2 years maximum in prison. And I think she's so inspirational, but just because she has her determination to do something about it, but also the fact that she had absolutely no legal background, no legal or political background. She came in and educated herself and created a massive change that will no doubt affect and help so many different people. And I think when she was sort of campaigning, there were millions and thousands of women getting in touch saying, actually, this has happened to me a lot. So again, it's individuals who use their experiences and that have obviously been traumatic for them, and helping and using them to help others. And I think another group of activists are just young activists, like the climate strikers, like you guys all here today, that just have the absolute determination and confidence and to really fight and cause and campaign for things that you feel very, very strongly about. And it's amazing.
Great, thank you, Lily. Now it's over to Mia.
Yeah, so have you encountered any challenges on your campaigning journey?
Challenges. Yeah, I think so. I think it's quite interesting, sort of becoming very aware of and being quite actively vocal about feminism and sort of gender equality and different issues. Just being, I think, growing up and being aware of how girls are treated differently to boys, and how boys, that's such an assumption, but that's from my personal experience, and them being able to get away with things. And I think it's been a real key thing for me, especially during college and school, was actually standing up to the boys who were disagreeing with me and being shouted down quite a lot of the time. And I think it definitely played into, it was quite difficult, I think, for me to sort of recognize that I wasn't being over dramatic when I was calling them out for doing things, and it was actually, no, this is wrong. And it's having that confidence to sort of overcome that. And now feeling like I can take that sort of into different settings. So I think that's my personal reflection. But also I think the nature of the job that I'm in at the moment, so working with the students' union but with the university as well, I think it's been quite difficult working with individuals who don't necessarily agree with a lot of what you say, or don't really think that you have the authority to sort of speak about the issues that you're speaking about. So quite a few examples have been, I'm working with old white men who are, sitting in very well paid jobs, and they don't really want to listen to an angry young woman telling them that there are actually quite a few problems and they should probably sort them out. So it's having, again, I think going back to the confidence to say, actually, no, this is what needs changing, this is how you're going to change it. So yeah, it's dealing with different people, I think. I think another one as well has been, again, just going back to my job. So I work, the women, I'm representative, so the women's officer is responsible for the different sort of minority groups on campus. So students of colour, disabled students, and LGBT identifying students. And I don't personally identify with any of those groups. So it's been obviously a massive learning curve, and I think this is something that comes up time and again in my own personal journey as well. It's about being very much aware of the different barriers and challenges of other people, and being very willing and open to just listening and sort of taking that on board, and then having that open conversation with other people. Yeah, so I think it's definitely been a challenge in the sense that a realization, but also now having that knowledge of being aware of other people's sort of experiences and things. It's having the confidence to then take them forward.
Great, thank you, Lily. Now over to Steph.
How do you deal with criticism, and how do you work through this?
Dealing with criticism. This is quite an interesting one. I think if you'd have asked me that 5 years ago, I would have, if it was to do with campaigning and, sort of having arguments about misogynistic men, I think I would have just basically shouted at you or or shouted at anyone who questioned me. Just out of frustration. I think it's been really interesting to sort of see how it's having the patience, I think, to give people the space to sort of explain their position if it is constructive criticism, and having, again, that open conversation about our differing in opinions, or if it's something that I've done personally wrong. So obviously, because I'm a public figure within the Students' Union, like, some of my work has been criticised, and I think it's about taking a step back and not to take it personally, and to sort of have an understanding about where the individual's coming from. But also I think it does come back to the confidence in yourself. Like you would know if you have done a good job at something, or if you believe in something and it's sticking by your sort of vision and the belief in yourself, I think is the most important thing.
Yeah, definitely. There's lots of different ways of dealing with criticism, and I think it sometimes depends on what the criticism is as well. Sometimes, like, we've talked a lot as a group about how Yami's quote, really, that don't take criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice from. Sometimes you do have to sit back and listen, and like you said, and think, well, why are they saying that? But sometimes if it's sort of calling your human rights into question, you don't for that sort of stuff.
Absolutely not. Nobody's got time for that.
No. So the next question is sort of thinking back maybe throughout like your whole activism journey. So what different methods have you used to campaign?
This is quite a good one. We've done, obviously, before COVID times, we did a lot of protests, which were just incredible, and I think it's having, I don't think anything ever comes close to sort of that feeling of having numbers and having that numbers and just the environment as well, and people are listening, people are watching, I think is really, really key. I'm just trying to think of other ones that we had. I think holding different training workshops, which have been really, really effective, especially this year. So I've been working really closely with the sports teams. So we've had myself and Matt, the sports officer, basically held workshops with the different sports team members about sort of everyday sexism, and getting people to sort of question their own behaviours and having those self-reflection spaces for people to sort of learn from, and then sort of evaluating that and, you know, sort of trying to measure the impact that we've had on them. I think another key one has been writing letters to MPs, which we've found has been really, really effective, just because I think that it gives them the opportunity to obviously take things further within their own parties or within Parliament, but also it gives, we've got a really, really strong body sort of at the Students' Union of working quite closely with our local MPs, so building that relationship, because that's when you really do see the actual change. One of the groups that I've been working with at the Students' Union, called Our Bodies, Our Streets, are currently writing petitions and contacting Paul Blomfield about having different lights, so sort of in parks, keeping lights on, street lights on for longer hours, just because individuals feel unsafe, and hopefully if something changes, it's being able to create that tangible change very, very easy just by speaking to people who are in office effectively. We also have, I'm just trying to think of other ones as well. So obviously because of COVID, a lot of the stuff has had to be online. So we've had quite a few like educational sort of videos and posters and things that people can sort of visually get in can engage with, which have been quite good to do. So it's been a nice opportunity to sort of get creative with it as well, which has been quite good. One of the events that was supposed to take place as like a physical event was the Reclaim the Night March, which is basically a march through Sheffield. It's part of like the UN's 16 days of activism against gendered violence, and obviously it couldn't take place this year because of the government regulations. So we decided to have it as like an online rally. So we had like a big Zoom call and we had loads of different student speakers, which is quite nice. We had some poetry read and things. And because it was during lockdown as well, we basically had like an online banner making session. We had people sending in pictures of their banners and the posters they made and did like an online collage. And it was definitely difficult, but I think it's being able to engage people creatively despite it, being through lockdown.
Thank you. That's really helpful, going through all those sort of different types of campaigning methods that you've used, because sometimes we get a bit stuck, don't we, of like, oh, we know that works, so I'll keep at that. But that's awesome. Thank you. And the final question is from Mia, I believe.
So the last question is, what are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? I think honestly the experience of sort of running for Women's Officer and having the confidence to sort of put myself out there, and to be working really, really closely with the different student groups that I do, and I think in particular working with the BME committee, student committee at Sheffield, it's been very rewarding, because I think we've worked quite closely to tackle some of the issues that students of colour face at the university, and it's about sort of regaining their trust within the institution, but also allowing them to have better representation and confidence in the work that they're doing. So the officer roles next year are actually changing. So Women's Officer is becoming the Liberation Officer, and we're also introducing part-time officer roles, which means that so there's a different representative for each one of the groups. So there's going to be a BME student part-time officer, disabled students BME disabled students part-time officer. So all the different positions are going to be paid positions. So it's being allowed to increase the representation and engagement with the different student groups, which I think has been a real change, and I think will set the ball rolling for the future, really.
Great, thank you so much, Lou. That was all really interesting. So now we're going to open it up to the attendees. Oh, someone's already put something in the Q&A box. People are keen today. That is good. So please, everyone, write down any questions that you have for Lily about sort of activism, campaigning, what she does at the moment, what she's done in the past. So I think who's asking the first question? So the Gen Z group are going to go through the questions and ask them to Lily one by one. I think, who did we say was first? I think Muskan, if you're there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Fab. Can you see the question box?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Over to you.
What are your opinions on the suffragettes, and how would you feel if they existed today?
What a great question. The suffragettes were, I mean, yeah, they were incredible. I think looking back now, I studied them quite a lot when I was at college, and the sort of work that they were able to do, and the real confidence and determination to introduce change at the time was amazing. And I'd definitely love to meet them if they were alive today. I think also it's quite interesting to sort of look at it now, having studied feminism in a lot more depth than maybe I had when I was younger, but also I think it would be interesting to sort of ask them about, what they were doing and how because obviously they were an all-white female organisation, and I don't know if they were obviously doing a lot of work for women of colour or disabled women sort of at the time. So that first wave of feminism is really, really interesting, because they were paving the way for white women effectively, but not necessarily doing the most for other groups of women. But yeah, they were incredible. Has anybody seen the Suffragette movie as well? Because I thought they did a really, really good job of that. Yeah, it's one of my favourites.
Steph, I think it's you next.
Oh yeah, sorry. So Emily said that she said thank you and that the whole thing was fab, and she just wanted to know, how do you balance your activism with looking after your mental health?
What a good question, and what an important one as well. I think it's really, really key to sort of, and I think I've recognised this, in my job and also just from doing a lot of studying and researching. It's just sort of knowing your boundaries and sort of how much you can sort of cope with. I think I've learned to sort of cope with it and having designated time for myself just to completely switch off and not engage. And I think one of the key things that has become a real issue, I think, over lockdown, and especially and I know for a lot of the students that I work with, sort of the Black Lives Matter movement that obviously sort of grew in June last year, was the constant cycle and constant filter of just having so much information and being in contact all the time and taking so much of that in, especially through social media and things. So I found that while social media and Instagram are absolutely amazing tools for campaigning, they should definitely be used. It's having that downtime from those sort of areas and just completely switching off, because I think it's quite easy a lot of the time to not do that. And I think you can definitely tell when you haven't done that, because you feel very demotivated and exhausted just from constantly being on the go and talking and thinking about these things. And I know for obviously a lot of people, campaigning doesn't stop obviously when you go offline. These are lived experiences that individuals are sort of going through. But I think it is having that separation from the sort of issues that you're campaigning and that you're researching about or learning about, and having that time for yourself.
Absolutely, thank you. That's really good advice. We've talked a lot as a group about sort of self-care and looking after ourselves whilst campaigning. So yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you. Mia?
Sorry. Yeah, so the next question's from Sandra Ann, and it says, from your experiences in campaigning, is there anything you reflect on that maybe didn't work so well? What is it? And what would you say would be a good way to combat it for those wishing to start campaigning?
That's a really good question. One thing that hasn't worked well. I feel like this is obviously going from my personal experience as well, but I think it goes back to sort of the self-care element of it, in the sense that if you're working or if you're in conversation with different people that don't necessarily agree with you, it's having that boundary and knowing when to sort of stop and to not waste your efforts and your energy on those different individuals. Because I think it's really, really key to sort of have that boundary setting, and knowing when to sort of stop trying to persuade them for different things. And I think also in the COVID context, I guess, is with all the online stuff that we've been doing, it's quite difficult to sort of know how much students are sort of engaging with it. And I think that one thing that we've found is really, really helpful has been, rather than just giving out, sharing posts about information, raising awareness things, it's about having getting students to respond and how much information that they are actually taking in. So asking them questions like, oh, have you found this helpful? It's about it's keeping that conversation going, I think, which has been really, really important, but understandably so difficult given the fact that we're not seeing anybody apart from our computer screens for 8 hours a day.
Thanks, Lily. I think back to Muskan.
Which question are we on?
They've seemed to have gone quite muddled on my screen, so bless you, sorry. There's two from anonymous attendee that haven't been asked yet, if you wanted to ask one of those.
Okay. What types of campaigns have you done in the past? Did you manage to achieve any of your goals of these campaigns?
Yeah, so a good question. But I think back to other examples. So I think the key one that I'm working on at the moment, so I guess I can't really give you an answer for because we don't really know how it's going to work, is the work we've been doing with the BME committee about decolonising the curriculum. So this is slightly aside from sort of gender equality, but it's another key aspect of my remit. So we're working at the moment, again, very closely with the university to sort of implement some changes to sort of the content that's taught at university, and to sort of encourage our lecturers and the university staff to incorporate more of a diverse range of academics and speakers and things. And I think it's been quite effective at the moment because it's been a real sense of gaining that student voice again, and sort of having that collective feeling of feeling very empowered to be able to work towards something, in the midst of creating sort of a policy of proposals that we're going to take to the university staff, and it's having that backing and again that confidence to sort of go behind, and it's in the process of happening. So hopefully by June, when I leave office, I can say that we've been able to really do that.
So I don't know how it is for everybody else, but for me, it's like Lauren is first. So Lauren asked, how can under 18s get involved in activism?
Oh, in so many ways. You don't have to be an adult to be an activist, as you guys are, proving day and night. Anyhow, Instagram, I mean, given in the circumstances at the moment, just sort of reading and researching on different issues and sort of working in groups like this to implement some changes, but also just educating yourselves and your people and your family members and your friends about sort of different issues and things that you're really interested in. I think that sort of campaigning and things it's quite good to sort of just realize that you can do very much work, and it doesn't necessarily have to take part in like a public forum. You can be doing so many things to sort of educate yourself and build your knowledge, which you can then take on to different projects and things. And I think, having the Zoom calls with these sorts of things as well have been really, really brilliant. And as soon as we can go out and protest, because it is just one of the best things ever. And I guess going back to sort of the other examples that we've used at Sheffield Students' Union, contacting local MPs has been really, really good, and working together to sort of do that is absolutely key.
Thanks, Lily. I'm just going to piggyback off that and have a shameless plug, which I have just written in the chat as well. So as part of the project, after the activism series, we are going to be running sort of 12-week activism training for young people, and we're going to do that in 2 age ranges as well, so 11 to 15 and 16 to 25. And that's going to be hopefully some of it in person if we can by then, but if not, it'll be online. So if you want to find out any more about that, I've popped my email address in the chat, and we would love to have as many young people as possible learning sort of how to sort of get into campaigning and activism.
So the next question is, what are your top tips for campaigning and being an activist?
Top tips for campaigning and being an activist. I think it's number one, do your research and make sure that you have sort of an awareness of the different issues that you want to change and that you want to address. And I think my other top tip is just be confident, go out and do it, and be very unapologetic about what you're doing, because you know I've learned this, and I think, you know, if I had one piece of advice for myself when I was 16 or 15 would just be go out and do it, because it is the most liberating thing to sort of realize and have that confidence and really have the knowledge and awareness of knowing what you're talking about and seeing that you can really implement some big changes, even if that's in your social circle, even if it's speaking to, I've had plenty of discussions with my grandparents about feminism and things, and even if it's just having that discussion and changing their minds about one very small issue, then I think, you know, it's so empowering and so liberating. So it's just, yeah, having the confidence to go out there, and also working with the people around, finding the people who are also interested in these sorts of things, and networking and building those sort of relationships and things are absolutely key.
Thank you. Muskan, I think we're back to you.
Is there anything you would tell your younger self based on what you know about activism?
I think it's that. I think it is having the confidence just to go out there and do it. And also I think, yeah, just going back to my earlier point of being quite unapologetic about sort of the time and the energy that you spend on speaking to different people and setting those boundaries for yourself, I think is really, really key. Yeah, and I think something that I've really learned in my role as well is recognizing that individuals aren't necessarily going to take you seriously the whole time. And I think it's taken a lot of sort of criticism and lack of acknowledgement from different people to sort of recognize that, you know, you are there for a reason, and everything that you do is so important, no matter at the time if you think that it isn't really having an effect, or a campaign didn't go a certain way, or you don't really feel like you're getting anywhere. Even just speaking out about this sort of issues and, you know, different causes and things, and educating yourself, I think is just the biggest thing. So yeah, that's just a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff I tell my younger self.
Hindsight is a beautiful thing, isn't it? So Steph, back to you.
So what advice would you give when talking about a subject you're very passionate about to someone who doesn't agree, to be able to get your point across without getting angry or upset, for example?
That's such a good question. This is what I have to do on a daily basis. I think it goes back, I think giving them the space to sort of say their point, I think is really, really key, because it's about having that, you know, that open conversation, and not necessarily repeating yourself, which I think I tend to do in a bit of a panic, but trying to bring it back to sort of like your main arguments about a certain topic, and yeah, I think that's it really. It's just giving them the space and taking a minute and to not get frustrated, but also again know when to sort of stop, and if it's causing you too much distress or anger, just knowing that they, you know, it's their loss if they don't want to agree with you, because you know that you're obviously in a really good position and you know you're right about a certain thing. So yeah, I think that's something I'm still learning.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that's a continual learning point for us. Yeah.
So the next question's from Emily. You've mentioned Michelle O'Cole and I May Destroy You as some really great influences, and I was wondering if you had any further recommendations to increase knowledge and understanding of feminism and/or activism.
Yeah, I think one of the key things that I've been doing, I think since I've started being interested in these sorts of topics, was just listening to loads of podcasts. They're really, really good, and there's a few key ones which I can give some recommendations to. There's a really good one called The High Low. I think they've stopped doing it now, but they have like a really good, it's sort of like a chatty conversation about sort of like the topical issues of the week, but also many of like the smaller stories that don't really get noticed about sort of gender equality issues. Another key one I would say is Girl Talk, the podcast, which again sort of it talks about the different issues. And the great thing about podcasts is that they really give a platform for individuals who aren't necessarily famous to sort of speak about their experiences and things, which I think is really key in giving the platform. I'm trying to think of like other different recommendations that are quite good. Oh, a really good sex positive TV show is Fleabag. I don't know if you've seen it. And so I can't remember her name. So she co-starred and wrote it as well. She's a really, really brilliant one. They're all the ones I can think of on the spot. I've got a few good book recommendations as well. I can send you a list after if that's helpful. Yeah, I'll do that. Nice.
Thanks, Lily. So I've got a question actually. Well, I've got two questions. One of them we keep asking you to think about when you were younger, and you're quite young yourself anyway, but was there sort of a defining moment when you were maybe same age as some of these guys, like 13, 14, when you were maybe at school, that made you think, I want to change this, like gender equality, we need more equality? I'm
just trying to think when I was back at school and just having, I think I got into an argument with one of my teachers about the wearing trousers and having to wear skirts. And it was basically encouraged at our school that we had to wear skirts. And I got into an argument with one of my teachers about having to wear skirts, and I was just really, really angry about it. I think that, and the fact that I was quite an angsty teenager and was getting told off for wearing nail varnish and makeup and things, and just saying it was very, very unfair. And sort of the treatment, I think, differently from having the treatment of, you know, being a girl compared to being a guy. We were always taught not to be so emotional, and I think when getting angry about things, or you're being over dramatic, or you're in your period, or those sorts of things, you know, the sort of issues you're sort of dealing with when you're 13 or 14, and having to sort of really cope with all of that, but also the underlying sexist behaviour of quite a lot of my teachers. So yeah, I think that was a really key defining moment, because it was sort of an exposure to sexism at a very young age, and just how our society is really letting down, you know, a lot of all of our young girls.
Thank you. Does any of the Gen Z steering group have any questions for Lily?
I do. So you've done quite a lot. So what do you have, like, what's your plans for the future? So what are you gonna do next?
Wow. So I did history and politics as an undergrad, and I'm very much in the process of working out what I would like to do in my life. I think I definitely want to keep working with so I've been doing a lot of work with local charities, and I'd like to work with the domestic violence charity, working and supporting women who've been victims of domestic abuse. I think that is one of the things that I would really like to focus on. I'm also in two minds about doing studying law, so becoming a lawyer and working in family law, specifically in children law and divorce law, because I think there's still a very, very long way to go in the way that we treat women in our courtrooms and our criminal justice system. So whatever I'll be doing, I'll be working closely with women, but it's just at what sort of capacity, really. And I think, yeah, it's just keeping that in the front of my mind. And there's a lot of wrong in the world. It sounds so cliche, but it is, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think that there's our responsibility to sort of tackle those issues. Does that answer your question? I hope it does.
So another question just popped up in the chat from Sandra Ann that says, I remember when I was in school getting a detention for refusing to do PE class when I was on my period. Do you think it would be helpful to have some awareness curriculum of feminism in relation to discrimination pulled into school education?
Yeah, 100%. I think this is one of the things that I have really, I think there's a lot that I've really realised when I've, you know, grown up and things, and looking back at my experience at school, is a lack of, number one, decent sex education, which is absolutely crucial, and a lack of awareness, I think, about the different issues that girls are sort of facing, and, you know, and guys are facing when they're growing up, because I think from a very young age, you're sort of introduced to a culture that doesn't really speak about sex or periods or menstruation or anything. And you know, as you grow up, you sort of realize that a lot of these unspoken issues are underpinning a lot of problematic behaviors for a lot of individuals. And I think if you begin young and you begin the education, having that openness again, rather than creating these taboo subjects, I think is absolutely key. I mean, the sex education in our schools at the moment is absolutely appalling. And there's a complete lack of awareness about so many different issues, which leads to a lot of individuals not knowing how to deal with them, but also feeling, you know, it links to a lot of different mental health issues as well. So yeah, 100%.
Thank you. So we've had another question come through the chat from Ari saying, what's your opinion on unisex toilets and changing rooms? I'm non-binary and have to go quite far to a disabled toilet in school. Sorry about that, Ari. That's not very good of your school.
Awful. Yeah, I think they're absolutely key. We've introduced at the SU, so having male, female, and then a unisex toilet as well. And I think it's about, until non-binary individuals and trans people are fully accepted and welcomed in the way that they should be, and it's having that comfortability. I think there is a long way to go in that, but having the unisex toilets and those safe spaces, I think those individuals are absolutely key. And I don't understand, you know, this is something that I've spoken to a few people about. It's just I don't really understand that any opposition to them. Yeah.
Thank you. So any other questions from participants, panelists?
I had a question actually. Just to add on to what you were saying before about wanting to study in law, 100% recommend it. I'm doing it at college at the minute and it is amazing. So I would 100% recommend it. And it's going to seem like a strange question, but when I was in primary school, when I was really young, I always used to get picked on because I always used to hang around with all the boys and play football and do I didn't really get along with the girls, and I used to get bullied for that a lot. Like my best friend, I've been friends with him for like 15 years. He's a boy, and I used to get bullied for that a lot. Like, have you ever like experienced anything like that when you were younger?
I don't think so to the same extent, and I'm really, really sorry that happened to you. But I do know that girls at secondary school and even younger at primary school can be awful, really, really horrible. And I think it's because, going back to sort of the way that we're brought up and sort of the issues that, you know, different girls are dealing with, and starting becoming interested in boys and having those sort of different relationships.
Yeah, like, it was awful, but I wouldn't change it for the world, because like it's like a brother-sister relationship, love him to pieces, but people just used to make fun of me, saying like, oh, you're like you're really boyish and it's disgusting, blah blah. But I wouldn't change it for the world, because I met some really good friends through them experiences. But I don't know, it just seemed, and people always used to say that like I only hang out with him because I fancy him, and that wasn't the case at all. He was like, yeah, and they're like, oh, you're best friends with a boy because you want to get together with him and all this, that, and I just like, I didn't know whether it was like just me, or like something that just happened at my school, or whether it happened like anywhere else.
No, of course, I think it's common, because, you know, people are not, you know, you're going through, as I said, you're going through a lot when you're that age, and there's no excusing some of the behaviour, but you definitely aren't on your own from that experience. And people who say those sorts of things are just silly. And the fact that you've learned from that experience and you see it now as a positive experience just shows what an amazing person you are, and turning that into confidence, and, you know, being able to deal with that.
Yeah, Sandra Ann's just written in the chat as well, on the side note, she had the same experiences as Mia, and it's a reflection on that person's character and not yours. You're wonderful the way you are.
Oh, thank you.
100%.
Thank you. That's a really lovely sort of summing up. I think everyone's really positive and supportive of each other, and that's really great, and that's what we like in these spaces. So unless anyone has any final questions. I'm so bad at like waiting a bit. So what I'm going to do is people are just writing their like experiences now in the chat. Sorry, I was like pausing then I was reading. That's really nice. Everyone can be really open and supportive in the chat. So what I'm going to do is pop in just a link into the chat, which is a really short, quick evaluation form just on sort of how you guys found today. And because we want to make this activism series as good as possible, so any honest feedback would be fabulous. But yeah, aside from that, thank you so much, Lily, for coming and sharing your knowledge with us and your journey. And yeah, just keep looking at the chat. People are going to be saying lovely things, I'm sure. And thank you to all the attendees for coming. Like I said earlier, the shameless plug, there is somewhere on the evaluation form as well to pop your email address if you are interested in doing some training around activism. We have got one more question. Okay. We got one more. So from Lauren saying, remember having a male English teacher in high school who would mock this girl for not wanting to be left alone in the class with the big bad boys. Oh, do you think teachers should have sensitivity training to avoid these situations?
Yes, 100%, 110%. Yes, they need to, because I think it goes under the radar a lot. And as I said, you know, looking back on your school experiences now, actually quite a few of them have been, you're just a lot more aware of it. And I think that when you're that sort of age and dealing with individual, you know, young kids as well, I think it's absolutely key. That's something that we're introducing at Sheffield as well, having sort of racial bias training, sensitivity training, and how to sort of deal with different issues, but also just how to be a bit more, you know, a decent human being, because he sounds like not a very nice human being. So yeah, definitely.
Great, thank you so much. And yes, thank you again, Lily, for coming along. And our next activism series webinar is actually this week as well. It's on Thursday around mental health. So Lily, you are welcome to come to that one as well if you'd like, as well as everyone who has come today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me as well.
You're welcome. Great. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.